Hello and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Hype with Black Enterprise. I'm your host, Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP and Executive Editor at Large for Black Enterprise. And as usual, we have a great topic, a great guest, and something you really want to get beyond the hype of when we talk about what's going on right now in our society, and today, and particularly in the area of the performing arts. Beyond the Hype's listeners, if you're a longtime listener or watcher, you may remember that I had as a guest on the global director of the Harold Washington Cultural Center on, this is during the pandemic, talking about how it was so important that cultural and performing arts institutions in general, and certainly those serving Black communities, Black-owned cultural and arts institutions, not be overlooked when it came to relief, PPP relief, and other relief during the pandemic. And she really did a great job of underscoring not only the cultural hits and the artistic hit that was being taken, but the economic hit when you talk about the performing arts and the way they drive everything from restaurant business to creating jobs and just any number of industries. And I'm happy to report that Jim Lita successfully, along with her cohorts in the arts community, lobbied to get significant PPP funding for performing arts venues all across the country. But now we're fast forward, and now we're here in 2022, and we've seen on Broadway and in theaters across the country, live theater come back to life. And that's the occasion that we're here to have our guest on, because the Harold Washington Cultural Center is started it on a limited run of its first live theater production since the pandemic shutdown, Queens of the Policy. We're going to learn more about Queens of the Policy. It's running from December 9th through December 16th. It's a limited run. It's a major step forward for this Black-owned nonprofit theater in Chicago. And we have the star of Queens of the Policy, none other than Arthur Barnes Jr. Welcome to the show, Arthur.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Well, listen, I want to start with your story as an actor. You're a young actor. I know that your decision to commit to this as a profession is very tightly woven with your relationship with the Harold Washington Cultural Center. I believe your first production for them was in 2014. Just tell me about your journey as an actor. How you came to decide that this was one of the things you wanted to pursue, and what you've done so far in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So my stage debut was indeed 2014. You got the year exactly right. I would say what actually began the bug, though, happened back in the third grade. And I remember our third grade class, my teacher, Miss Grover, here in Chicago, Illinois, she was putting on a production, and the students, we were all dressed up like business suits with briefcases. There was a moment in the production where on the bridge of the song, everyone would just walk around in a circle with their briefcases. For whatever reason, it wasn't a part of my plan. I didn't know I was going to do it. The teachers didn't know. I was just moved by the spirit. And in that moment, when it was my turn to walk, I walked around. I did like this. And the teacher, she stopped everything. She said, "Oh, that's great. I love it. So here's what we're going to do. Everyone's going to freeze. And then when Arthur comes and does this, then everyone starts moving." And that was my first experience being like a prominent piece of a production. And so years later in high school, I got a chance, as timing would have it, to be a student under an actor who came to the school to teach a communications arts class. And of course, with his passion being acting, he transformed the communications arts class into a performing arts class. That teacher's name was Kevin Morrow. He had been in Barbershop, Hoodlum, all types of movies and TV shows. And now he had come to work at Hales Franciscan High School, where I attended. And funny enough, as it all played full circle, Mr. Morrow had decided we were going to recreate a classic Chicago based story, Cooley High, which was a movie. And I would play the character Preach. And this movie would be considered Hales High. Now, my castmate, who was also a classmate, Jimmy Tillman, he played the role of Cochise. And if you've seen Cooley High, you know the relationship between Preach and Cochise. Fast forward, graduated high school. I still now have the acting bug in the full form because acting on that set that we made in the school, it became the main focus for me. This is all I wanted to do. I wanted to finish first period, finish second period, finish third period. Okay, ready to go act. And that was just it was the thing. And it didn't matter if he was saying, okay, we got to stay a little longer after school. Hey, we got to wait a little while longer. That was fine for me because I was really loving it. So after graduating high school, I bought myself a DSLR camera and I just started recording little monologues and little pieces of acting that I would do on my own, and I would put them up on YouTube or Facebook, and then my Facebook following would cheer me on. Oh, you're so great, you're doing good. I love your work. All of this to build up more and more confidence and more courage, and eventually it even got to the point where other creators who were working on a film project or maybe they were working on a music video or whatever the case may be, they then would reach out. Hey, I saw your work. I liked your work. I got a project idea. Did you want to jump on board? So for a little while, I'm just doing these monologues, but then people would start writing out script ideas for little monologues. Hey, I got an idea if you playing a role of this. And I'd film it real quick and throw it up on the internet. And sure enough, as I'm catching the flow of doing, I get a call from none other than Jimmy Lee Tillman. And he says, hey, you need to come to the Harold Washington Cultural Center. My auntie, Jimalita Tillman, is doing a stage play. You need to come read for the role. I'm completely blown back at this point with total what would be the word I'd want to use? I'm excited, but I'm nervous because I have no experience. I'm believing everyone's going to be these top tier stage actors. Everyone's going to be thespians, and I just played around at my house on YouTube. I'm not one of them. And so I remember I would drop Jimmy off after high school at that theater on 47th and King Drive, but I never knew what they did in there. I never knew about all of the culture of that venue. And so when I found out that the role was going to be for Preach and Cooley High, I just looked up and said, oh, it's a no brainer. This is really meant for me to do this. So I auditioned. I came dressed as Preach because I really love this acting, this whole acting arena. So I'm doing it all full force. I'm rehearsing before I go to rehearsal. And I got the part. And I remember, I'll never forget, Jimalita Tillman sat right there, and Cassandra Bell sat next to her, and they said these words that really put me at ease. And this is one of the importance of community theater. They said, don't worry about having it. We'll know if you got it. Just do the best that you can so that we know what we're working with. So that took the whole, I don't know anything about stage. I don't know, da 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 da. I don't know the technical. That took all of that out of my head. And I was able to just be a true creative artist and express myself on the stage in that role. After that, the rest was history. I mean, every show that the Cultural Center did, they gave me the opportunity to come perform in it. Many times they gave me an opportunity to audition for the lead role and secure it. Other producers or directors or creators who would be in the audience, they see the work, they would appreciate it and say, hey, by the way, do you have too much work on your plate, or do you have enough room to maybe do this project? And me being the actor that I was saying yes to everything. If as long as there was an opportunity and I felt like it came to me by way of, just timing and alignment, I felt like it's for me. And so I would take them and I would enjoy those roles. And over the course of time, the Cultural Center ended up taking me all over the world performing for stage plays. We did a stage play that took place in London, England, Paris, France, Nassau, Bahamas. I performed on Broadway in New York. I went to the Tony Awards as a guest on several occasions. This is all due to the Cultural Center. They would do these type of things. And so that got me into that mix, and I had just been stuck with it ever since. The only thing for me was how to go further, how to do more. What else could I act in? Which brought me to the point of being a creator and saying, well, rather than waiting on work, you can create work too. And so that's kind of where I ended up taking that segue. It eventually even got to the point where during the shutdown, we'll get to that, of course, but during the shutdown, Now I'm not working in the theater, so I'm full on creating. And I even got to the point where I had some experience on a TV set. I got cast for my first appearance in a TV show, so I got to see that same craft and practice amongst the pros, like the professionals. I was working with directors who were directing TV shows and movies that I had been watching since I was a kid, coming up, watching it on TV. Oh, that's so great. Oh, I would love to be in that. And next thing you know, I'm on the set looking around, and here's that director and here's that producer right there shaking my hand and hey, da 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 da. And so it really became like a dream come true, all by just following the path that I set out and said, this is what I want to do. I feel like anybody can do anything they want to do. When you set out like that, everything else just opens up for you. And that was kind of my experience.
So and that just everything you described, it kind of underscores for the Beyond the Hype audience exactly why I wanted to have you for this conversation. Because I've interviewed. First of all, the very first person I ever interviewed for this show was Datari Turner, the independent filmmaker, producer, with from I think it's Love and Hip Hop or whatever. I get
Yeah.
mixed up with the reality shows he does. He's done so
Yes.
much work. But I met him as an independent filmmaker. And then we've had Los Alonso's been a guest on the show. Wayne Brady's been a guest on the show.
Oh, that
And
episode.
oh, bet, bet.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that your story underscores, that in their own ways, each of their stories underscore, is that we think that this all starts with, you're walking down the street of, Hollywood Boulevard in LA and somebody says, oh, that's the guy. We need to. But most of the time, it starts out in theater programs, community theaters, school theaters, small theaters, very much like the Howard Washington Cultural Center. And the reason I became such a supporter of the Howard Washington Cultural Center, I'm a big supporter of the arts. I'm a creative at heart. My degree is in visual arts,
Oh, nice.
and when I first learned of the Howard Washington Cultural Center after falling in love with Chicago, because that's my favorite city. I grew up in the New York metro area, but was I couldn't believe there was this 1,000-seat state of the art theater with dance studios and podcast studio now and computer lab sitting in the
Mhm.
middle of Bronzeville. And if you're from New York,
Yeah.
that's like sitting in the middle of Harlem.
Yes.
And, literally the gem of Chicago. You got to understand, 1,000-seat theater is 2 or 3 times as big as your typical Broadway theater.
Yes. Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so you're not talking about a small venue, and it's a relatively new venue. And and then when I learned about the programs that it does for seniors and children, and we won't go through all the details of everything the Howard Washington Cultural Center does, but it really underscored the importance of the contribution of the center to much more than just concerts and plays happen there.
Right.
And then the fact that it's a black-owned nonprofit institution that actually owns the land in addition to the productions that are
Yes.
being produced there, it's a very, very, very unique thing. And I've also got the pleasure of meeting other people who come through there who are now, like you said, actors, whether on
Mhm.
Broadway, on television, doing things for everybody from MTV to whatever, and to find out, oh yeah, I started out early in my career. I was a kid at the Howard
Yes.
Washington Cultural Center.
Yes.
So your story echoes a number of the stories that I've heard over the last couple of
Yeah.
years.
Absolutely. And
So
that,
go ahead.
yeah, well, that's for me, that's one of the most critical points about it, is that you yourself have met and exchanged conversations with individuals who have now reached high levels in their craft, in their practice, reached a level that's respected by the rest of the world because you've gotten to that point. But when you follow the breadcrumbs, it goes all the way back, not just to community theater, but in this case, and in the case of your conversations, specifically the Harold Washington Cultural Center. Because, I've seen in my years of being there, I have seen children come in and learn how to help set up a stage, how to move props on and off a stage, how to pay attention to the lighting, how to be quiet on the back of the set, but be able to communicate so that everything can run efficiently and smoothly. And I've watched over the years those same youth start to mature and become teenagers and young adults and still in the craft and still doing even more. But instead of being the kid who was, hey kid, go move that da 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 da, and this is why you got to do it. Now the kid's older saying, oh hey, real quick, make sure you don't step over that because it's gonna create feedback in this or that. Now they're at that point where they have that experience and they can give instruction and advice to people because they've been through it themselves. They've literally grew up in the theater. And even with the actors who they've come in maybe as a stagehand or maybe just helping out moving things on the set, but showed an interest in actually being in it. And one of the beauties about community theater, there's no politics. Everybody gets a shot. Everybody gets a chance. Everybody gets a platform. You're never going to sink or swim. It's always a raft, always a boat there. Someone's there to help you and assist you and make sure to cheer you on and make sure that you flow through this seamlessly and have a great experience. And that's so important because it builds up your confidence. And one individual in particular, I watched her as a child come in on the stage, and she was, of course, as a child, shy and bashful, performing in front of, like you said, over 1,000 people, 1,000 strangers that you don't know, and they're all just standing there looking at you, waiting for you to do something. You're a kid, that's a lot of pressure. But
Right.
now, over the course of time, that kid has been doing monologues and is even in Queens of the Policy with a pretty prominent role. Completely confident, smooth, flowing through their lines. Honestly, when you see it and I point the kid out to you, you would never believe that this kid had zero experience and started off as a kid just coming in, hey, go up there, and your scene is as soon as they wrap up, all you do is go up and wave bye everybody. Just something small to help you build that confidence up to get that comfortability on that stage.
You
And it's
know,
all a part of
the
yeah.
Howard Washington mantra is a commitment to children, community, and culture. And those
Yes.
three things underscore this idea that you're talking about serving a population and creating opportunities for training and education and employment. And again, it's more than just the people on the stage who are acting. There's a whole
Mhm.
industry that goes on behind that in live theater and in theater in general. That you're talking to a community that normally, especially young people, would never get exposed to this.
Absolutely.
They wouldn't know what somebody's supposed to, what a stagehand is supposed to do, and why that's important. What set
Mhm.
design is, and why that's important. What lighting is, and why that's important. How sound is managed, and why that's important. And so community theaters in general, but in this case, a black community theater in a black
Yeah.
community in
Yes.
particular, is exposing generations of people to opportunities that would be closed to them under normal circumstances. And when we talk
Absolutely.
about the need to diversify, if you will, we're in this age, the post George Floyd age of DEI. This idea we
Mhm.
need to create more diversity, inclusion, and equity. It's like, how could you not support an organization like Howard Washington Cultural Center because of the outcomes that we see being delivered?
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
let's fast forward to this current production, Queens of the Policy, which represents the return of live theater. Again, I think this was an important milestone to document because it's important for our audience to understand. First of all, most performing arts venues shut down entirely during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Many of them did not make it back. Many, and I'm not
Yeah.
just talking about the black ones. A lot of performing arts venues, that was their ending. There are
That's
those who are coming back and they're making it back. And of course, a lot of the black-owned and black-focused entities had a much harder time getting access to relief money and other things. The
mhm.
Howard Washington Cultural Center managed to continue to operate even during that period. You doing virtual events and finding ways, COVID safe ways to continue to serve and find
You
places
did.
to give kids a place to go, other arts institutions a place to go. And so, one of the reasons I'm really excited about the return of live theater to HWCC is that, in a way, it's a celebration and a reward for everything that the theater came through to get to this point. Talk to me about the importance of people coming to see Queens of the Policy. One, because it's a great play, and I'm going to let you tell more about what the story is about than I will. But why it's really important for people to come out to support this theater in particular at this particular time, because while performing arts venues are back out, we're not out of the woods. They're not out of the woods. I mean, by any stretch of the imagination. You're talking about people talking about impending recession in 2023. This is an important production for people to see. One, for great entertainment, but also if you believe in supporting Black institutions, this is one where you can come out and really make a difference.
Yes, absolutely. So when I think about that, the first thing that comes to my mind is the word theater. And for me, when I mesh a theater and venue together, so that's a theater venue, I feel like that entity in itself is like a realm. It's a world. The theater in itself is its own world, separate from what's going on in society. And inside of this realm, creative energy through artists, whether you're an actor, sound engineer, light specialist, you're all creative artists. Creative artists are able to express themselves, bounce that energy off of other creative artists, create new forms of expression, and then enrich themselves with their confidence and their culture. And that energy is able to keep alive and create so much opportunities, information, knowledge about history, about the culture. Because when you have a platform to create, you've got a canvas, you've got a blank canvas. You can make absolutely anything. You can tell a story about anything, something made up to imagine and create hope, something that can give you more insights to strengthen and build your faith. But also, and in particularly the case with Queens of the Policy, historical fact and information about the culture that may have actually over the course of time kind of vanished. Like I know for myself, and this is not just with the Queens of the Policy, but almost every production that Jim and Lita Tillman at the Harold Washington Cultural Center produced, almost every single one of them is almost like coming to a Black History class. You know, you're not just going to hear about the standard ones that you hear about growing up in school. When you look up Black history and we celebrate Black History Month, and there's always these same prominent figures, you're going to hear about people you've never heard of, at least for myself. And never in grammar school, never in high school, never heard of any of these individuals. But when you do the research behind it, like you hear the name Myra Adele Logan, for example, you just hear that name in the performance. And you say, well, let me search up this lady Myra, and you find out that she was the first woman ever to perform open heart surgery, and she happened to be a Black woman. Never knew about this. The character that I portray, his name is William Augustus Greenlee, and Gus Greenlee, he was a prominent business owner. He actually, one of the most notable things that stood out to me, he owned a Negro League baseball team, and this is back in the 40s. So these are prominent figures, and it's almost like if you take a second and just imagine taking a lot of the celebrities and notable figures of today that we know right now. It's like, how have you not heard of such and such? Or you don't know who such and such is? Like, we know all these people right now. But imagine if over the course of time, they just vanished. People stopped talking about them. They stopped posting pictures. The pictures still exist because you can go look up the pictures of Greenlee and the Jones brothers and everyone else. You can always look these up, but it's not in the media. It's not in the news. And if you're not having these conversations with the generations before you, for them to tell you, oh yeah, such and such, this was that person, and this was that person, they literally disappear. So imagine a whole world of celebrities and notable figures that we all know just vanished. And now there's a new generation of people going around their daily lives. They don't know where the stoplight came from. They don't know where this and that, or who was responsible for this, or Dr. Charles Richard Drew, who was responsible for organizing the largest blood bank in America, the first to do that. you wouldn't know these kind of things. But when there are theaters like the Harold Washington Cultural Center who base their focus on shedding light on those gems that have kind of got dusted over, kind of got hidden, it's absolutely paramount to keep that realm, that world of the theater alive so that that energy can continue to flow and those stories can continue to be brought back to life. Specifically, when we talk about Black culture, though, in our communities with Black institutions like the Harold Washington Cultural Center, now we're not just talking about prominent figures from the past, not even just our prominent figures from the past, but we're also going into the point where we can relate to the culture by speaking from our perspective.
Mhm.
It's our story being told by us. There's just certain things in certain cultures that we just kind of all connect in. We kind of all have a lot of similar households. Like it's not uncommon. I remember I was on the internet scrolling around and there was this trending meme or something like that going through, and it mentioned listing things or tell me you grew up in a Black household without telling me you grew up in a Black household. And one of them was like, the plastic bags go under the sink. Like that's something we all
Yeah,
know. You
right.
know that you get plastic bags from the grocery store. You don't throw them away. You take them, you fold them up, and you put them in a little bag or pouch or whatever you keep them in. That's just something that we all do. And
Right.
you're able to take those type of little things, just those subtle things that are very relatable to the audience, and put them in the stage play. And so
Mhm.
when you support institutions like the Cultural Center, you feed it the energy that it needs to stay alive so that it can keep doing that. These stories can keep being told, these opportunities for the youth can keep being developed, and not just the youth, but even me myself. I didn't come in as a kid, I came into the Cultural Center as a young adult, but with zero true professional
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
My first stage play here with Cooley High, I remember we were doing a rehearsal and there was a line where they mentioned, I know now that this is a furniture piece called The Break Front, but there was a scene where they were like, one of the actresses was asking, um, is the break front right here or is the break front right there? And that's when that lack of confidence kicked in me. I'm like, I don't even know what a break front is. I'm thinking it's like a point where an actor has to stop here and break to the left, or like, what is a break front? I found out later it's just a furniture piece.
Right.
But thanks to me being in there and the way that institution helped its artists to grow, I know my difference between right and left and stage right and stage left. You learn all of these different technical terms. You learn to do by doing, by getting involved and being in there. And that's one of the things that comes as a benefit of having those contributions from the community. When these shows go on, you have to realize by these institutions being nonprofit, when these shows go on, this is kind of how they keep the theater alive, by people coming and supporting, bringing those tickets, seeing the show. They're gonna enjoy the show. It's not even their responsibility to enjoy it. You're gonna enjoy the show. You're gonna have a ball, and then you go out and you tell someone else, "Hey, I just saw this show at the Cultural Center. Queens of the Policy was great. I never knew about this. I never knew about that. My children enjoyed it." Because all of the shows are children friendly, family friendly. They do a great job of making sure that yet you can still enjoy it. And so you come in, you share this with your friends, and then they go and they share it with other people, and the word keeps getting spread. And before you know it, that financial energy keeps coming through the theater, and the theater can continue to be that world that allows creative artists to express themselves and bring those stories to life.
Yeah, and we're talking about funding not only the production themselves, we're talking about funding dance classes. We're talking about
Yeah,
STEAM education programs. The Dorothy Junior STEAM
yeah.
Leadership Institute works out of there. We're talking about what's Brill's
With the tap, with
the tap dance. Why can't I call his name out? Oh my God.
Brill
Let's leave
Bear.
it there. There's other arts organizations and institutions that work out of the cultural center, and because of the success of the cultural center, they're able to economically support and provide venues and resources for those organizations as well. We call them arts partners. We just look at the arts partners that are Howard
Yes,
Washington Cultural Center.
yes,
And
yes.
apologies to Brill, because Brill's gonna be mad. Why couldn't you remember the name of my organization. Mad Rhythms. Mad
Man,
Rhythms. That's what it is.
yeah.
Mad Rhythms. Check out Mad
hmm
Rhythms. But listen,
hmm
let's again focus the Queens of the Policies on a limited run from December 6th through, no, December 9th through the 16th.
hmm
Shows practically every day. We definitely want people to come out and check it out. But as you said, it's a great production, and I'm not going to give too much away about the story, but it is based on real people. Again,
Yes.
Jamila Tillman, who wrote the play, did this research. She goes to the Library of Congress. She digs up all this stuff about these real
Yeah.
people that were prominent figures in Black America at the time. But like you said, a lot of times they become what they call hidden figures, as we saw the movie.
Yes.
These people were real people that did real things. But
hmm
beyond that, you're not going to school. You're going to go to school. You're going to learn, but there's singing, there's dancing, there's a comedic
Yeah.
element to it. There's action. Tell me in rough strokes what the play is about without giving too much away.
Ooh, I gotta admit, there are a lot of plays where I could just give you a quick rundown about the play. Oh, this play is da 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 da. But this play in particular, what a show to come back to, right? What a show to bring it back when we come back to live theater, because this one, it is very difficult to give you almost anything without giving it away, because the thick of the play itself is all based in, I feel like I'm giving away just getting ready to say this. It's all based in almost what becomes a plot twist. And
Yeah.
so those elements, it's special. I will say this, for those that don't know about policy or the numbers racket, it's what we now know today as the Illinois lottery. If you heard about the lottery, that was the numbers racket. And to my knowledge, you had back then in the 40s, um, Ed Jones and his brothers, the Jones brothers, and of course you got the ones in New York and all around. People were doing this.
Yeah.
This wasn't just in Chicago; it was all around.
Yeah, and
But
this is
what
even though this story is set in the 40s, I gotta let people know the numbers, uh, culture and industry, again the neighborhood lottery, if you will. I
mm-hmm.
gotta let you know this. My first newspaper job in New York, in Brooklyn, Big Red News, grew that Big Red News. The newspaper grew out of a number sheet called Big Red.
Wow,
So
wow,
the number sheet became so popular that the publisher of the number sheet, William Underwood, real person again,
yeah,
started producing community news. Said this is a way to get news out because we know people are going to pick up this sheet. And then he had eventually sold the newspaper, but kept the number sheet. But the number sheet, the person he sold it to, the late Walter Smith Jr., the deal was you own the paper, but you have to carry the number sheet as the centerfold. So my
mm.
first job as coming out of college, I became the editor in chief of this black weekly newspaper. That was the
Wow,
largest circulated black newspaper, even more than the Amsterdam News at the time, even more than the City Sun, because the circulation was driven by the popularity of this number sheet. And
of the
again,
number,
for those of you who
right?
don't know about policy, if you played your number, you had to know what came out, and you got your number sheet to find out what came out the day before, and it would give you little kind of hints and clues about what you should play
Ooh, yeah,
today.
yeah,
You know,
mm-hmm.
so yeah, this is not this play is set in the 1940s, but it's a culture that existed as late as the mid to late 80s.
Yes,
In Harlem
yes.
and in Bronzeville and urban communities around the country, black neighborhoods around the country.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's another key point is how much was able to grow out of the empire that came from the numbers racket for our community, but specifically during the Depression.
Mm.
So this was during a time when the country was at a what are we gonna do? And suddenly you've got these group of individuals, black individuals, that come out and have created these multi-million dollar empires. So they are running around in the fanciest of clothes, the fanciest, staying in the fanciest places. I mean, decked out, living like multi-millionaires because they were. And this was millions back then.
Right.
During the Depression, you could imagine the contrast of seeing people waiting around, unemployed, not knowing where they're going to get anything to eat, not having this, not having that. And then you've got, a group of prominent black figures driving around in a car, rolling past, looking absolutely outstanding and fabulous. And this was really truly showing you the secret part that we missed, it was really truly showing you the power of us having group economics, because
Yeah.
that's essential what that was showing. When you're doing the numbers, everyone's pulling their money together from the community. And then someone in the community is going to get a nice piece of that. And if they did it right, if they had the community based mind, they gave back to the community. And this is how a lot of businesses that are still around today actually came
Oh
up.
yeah.
A lot of them got their loans from the Jones brothers. A lot of them got their loans from policy. When they couldn't go to the bank to get a loan because they were being denied because there was an agenda to keep our community down, they were the ones to help bring it apart and bring it up and make that actually become a reality. And so when we go into queens of the policy, we don't focus predominantly on the Jones brothers. Instead, we focus on the women, the queens
Mhm.
of the policy. You know, what were they doing during this time? What roles did they play? What were some of the key parts that they had to execute in the system of policy, in the system of building this empire for the community? Who were they? What did they do? Like I mentioned, Myra Dale. We didn't know about these figures, but now we know about them because it got brought back up. And there are other figures, just like Myra, just like Charles Drew. There are other figures in the play that we mention, we tell you about, pilots that you may not have heard of. All of
Mm.
this is all wrapped into this story. I want to talk about it so bad, but it's so
Right.
hard every time I catch myself
We
getting ready
don't
to
want
say
to give too much away.
start. Yeah, you can't give it away. It's that
Yeah.
good. It's
It is
that
that
good.
good.
We
And,
started
yeah,
actually right.
so, suffice it to say, and then this speaks to my passion for the play itself because again, I'm 35 years in at Black Enterprise. Part of the reason I got to know Chicago so well is because I've interviewed the John Johnsons and the George Johnsons. In my first 10 years at Black Enterprise, you couldn't cover black business unless you interviewed and got to know these people, and to understand that the very rich black business legacy of Chicago can be traced back to the
Yes.
wealth that was generated and accumulated and pooled from the policy game. That's so. So if you have an appreciation for black business, black entrepreneurship, black history in Chicago, but the story is a Chicago story, but obviously applies to this could be duplicated in other cities around the country, Detroit,
All over.
all over. But you gain a real appreciation for understanding how this black business class that Black Enterprise began covering when the magazine was founded in 1970. But it didn't start in 1970. It didn't start in 1960 with the civil rights movement. It started far earlier. And Queens of the Policy is just a great play to get an appreciation for that in a truly entertaining way without us giving away this.
Right, right.
It is really, you got
Oh,
to check it
it
out
is.
for yourself. We don't want to spoiler.
Yes, we don't want to spoil it. We don't want to spoil it. It's easy. It seems like it would be easy to say, "Oh, you're just saying great play because you're an actor in it." But honestly, I sat out, for scenes that I'm not in. I've sat out and watched this play. It's outstanding. It's a great play. It'll keep you on your toes watching it. But like we said in the beginning, you're gonna go to school, but you're not gonna be in class. You're gonna be learning. This is gonna be entertainment. You'll be sitting there enjoying it. Some songs will come on that you may hear depending on the generation that you're from. You'll be singing along with it. And if you haven't heard this song, you'll catch it because these are some of the best songs from back then. And
Yeah,
music is universal,
yeah.
timeless. So some of the best songs from back then. And you'll see these dance numbers and the choreography, and all while you're watching, because it's so great and it's so grand, it's easy to forget these are all just a collective of individual artists who came to a community theater and tried to figure it out.
Mm,
Here's what I know I can do. How can I assist with what I can do? Here's what I can do, and here's what I can do. Well, tell you what, let's come together, put it like this. Let's help you develop this a little bit more. Let's give you some responsibilities, which which is like a call to action, so that you start bringing out those other pieces that you didn't even know you had. I've watched a director who's now helping with directing, but I've watched him just be a dancer. All he did was come to the shows and dance. And later it's like, well, you know what? You do it so well. How about you teach these five how to do it? Then before you know, he's got a dance class. And he's still to this day has a dance class. And on top of having his own dance class, now he's getting his feet wet actually directing some of the plays. So getting your hands involved and getting these pieces of the puzzle and getting that experience, all of that comes from being in that community theater. And with that community theater, there's that driving force to help push you through and help teach you. But there's also, and this is the best part, there's that responsibility to give back. And you
Mm.
know that. You know that the whole time. And you want to because of how much you feel was poured into you during your entire time there. You want to bring something back to that theater. And I want any guest that comes out at any one of the shows, whether it's opening night or closing night, I want you to keep that in mind while you're watching, while you're sitting in your seat and you're looking up at that stage in absolute awe by this great performance. Just remember that these were just individual people, individual artists who just had a passion for what they wanted to do and they just worked it along the way. It may seem like they were just these outstanding stars that have been doing it for 20 years and but a lot of them got their start right there in the culture center. A lot of them grew their skills and their abilities and perfected their craft right there. And you're watching a piece of their journey because we're all still in it. No one on the stage is retired. We're all still in it. So you're a part of that journey.
You
And
know,
it's a
the other element, and you touched on it earlier when you talked about another production of the Howard Washington Cultural Center, Kings of the Policy, that you guys did
yes,
in 2019. Um, people think community theater, and often it's based on images they see on TV or whatever, and they don't recognize the reach and impact of community theater, and in this case, Black community theater. And I'm talking about the fact that Kings of the Policy, yeah, it was performed on the Howard Washington Cultural Center stage, but you mentioned earlier, you took it to London, you took it
yes,
to Paris, you took it to Nassau,
yes.
you took it, to stages around the world. And for
Mm-hmm.
many other people in those productions, it was their first time going outside the country.
Absolutely.
They first time to got a passport.
Yes.
And we're talking about young people and older people who are like,
Yes.
no, you're opening up the world. And so when we're talking about the impact of the Howard Washington Cultural Center as a community theater, yeah, it puts on plays, and of course, there's other great things that happen there. I saw Rakim perform at the Howard Washington Cultural Center.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
it's a true full-fledged performance venue. But when you think about things like Kings of the Policy being performed around the world, Queens of the
Yes.
Policy, I know there are plans for that to be
Yes.
performed in New York and in Europe and other places. Again, you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about people who I might have been like a 11-year-old on the south side of Chicago, never been anywhere. My mama never been anywhere. My grandmama never been anywhere.
Yep.
And
Yes.
now I'm in
Yes.
Paris. I'm in Paris performing on a stage. I'm in London, or even I'm in New
Yeah.
York. And the
Yeah.
Hawaii Culture Center you mentioned earlier brings students and actors to the Tonys every year. The only community
Yeah.
theater I know of that does that, black or white. You know.
Right. Right. And that's such a big piece. How many people have actually been to the Tony Awards? Like actually there in it. We've all seen them on TV. We've watched it, but actually be there and see what's happening while it's on commercial. Because the venue doesn't disappear while we're on commercial. We're still there. And those are experiences that we got thanks to the cultural center. We didn't even know to ask for that. That's another beautiful thing about it. Like you said, if you're just an 11-year-old kid from the south side of Chicago, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's out there. You don't know what you're missing on. You don't know any of this. You don't know what to ask for. You can't say, "Hey, expose me to more of the world," if you don't know that's even an option. Who goes to a theater and says, "Hey, so when are you guys taking us to the Tony Awards? Hey, so I like the way this place looks. When are we going overseas?" You don't go expecting that. You don't even expect that to be a part of community theater. And yet the cultural center made that happen. I'm talking about me included. I'm talking about actors who are adults, younger than me and older than me, who never had a passport and didn't even get it for whatever reason. Maybe put it off, maybe thought it would be too complicated, whatever reason. We know humans procrastinate. But when it came down to this, Jim Alita Tillman and the staff at the Cultural Center, they made it a mission. Individually took people, picked them up, took people down to where they had to get this processed, helped them get it processed, walked with them, essentially held their hand. I remember standing in line with Jim Alita Tillman. Standing in line essentially held their hand through the process of getting your passport, set you up, and before you know it, it's coming in the mail, and you're holding this in your hand. Like, why didn't I do this before? And the whole essence of what helped you get there was community theater. It's hard to see it at first when you're sitting there and you're holding this and you're thinking about the world of the possibilities, because we all know the benefit of travel is that's just a whole conversation of itself. We could have a
Yep.
whole nother call about exposing yourself to culture around the world all in itself. Travel alone is a big deal. So you're sitting here and you're thinking about these new doors that are about to open for you, and suddenly you got to remember all of this is made possible just because I'm an actor, just because I'm acting at this cultural center, at this theater, and they are doing so much more than, like you said, just plays and dances and performing arts. There's so much, literally changing lives, exposing people to a lot more. Because when you expose yourself to more and your mind has a broader perception, it changes everything. The
Yes.
way communicate with others, the way you shake someone's hands, the actions that you do throughout the day, and your actions create your habits, and your habits create your life, all from your mind. That mind change comes from being exposed to different experiences, being able to say you've been at the Tony Awards, being able to go overseas, going overseas and performing and having an audience who doesn't even truly fully speak your language as a native language. And they're watching and they're keeping up and then they're cheering, And it's like, wow, I'm really overseas performing. All of this made possible because of community theater, but all of that being made possible because of the community that pours into the theater. So you see how pouring into the theater is literally in itself changing the lives of the community, generation behind generation.
So let me take off my Black Enterprise Senior VP hat and put on my Howard Washington Cultural Center patron hat and be very
Yeah.
direct. If you are in Chicago between December 9th and December 16th, we want you to go check out Queens of the Policy. If you're not going to be in Chicago in that window during their limited run, then we just want you to really support um, Howard Washington Cultural Center in particular, but theater venues, community arts venues, especially Black-owned cultural venues across the country, because it's about more than just an evening of entertainment. But definitely we want you to get tickets to Queens of the Policy. Tell your friends. I'm proud to say that I'm going to be hosting as one of the hosts for the final performance on December 16th. We're doing a VIP media day. Got so far about 40 of my closest friends. Hopefully we'll get even more on board between now and that date. Again, to just support this institution, to have a great night of entertainment, but to support this institution. So I'm really looking forward to the December 16th performance because I know that's going to be a big night. But we really want people, you can get tickets on Eventbrite, or you can just reach out to the Cultural Center directly and get tickets. They got some discounts for seniors, I think, discounts for schools and groups. I don't know all of those details, by heart. But my point is, I'm being very direct. This is a direct ask. This is a direct commercial. This is a direct shameless plug for you to go see Queens of the Policy. And again, I've only seen bits and pieces as a supporter and a patron. I've been privileged to be able to see a little bit of what you guys are doing behind the scenes. But I gotta say, Arthur, you are I've gotten to know you over the last couple of years, but this is the first time I get to see you in a production because of
Mm.
the shutdown of the pandemic. Nobody was performing.
Down,
You know,
right.
how exciting is it? You started to talk about it a little earlier to be back. I mean, I talked again when I talked to Datari, it was during the pandemic. I talked to Wayne twice, once before he was working again, and now he's back doing big things. But each of them had a little story to tell about what it's like to be a creative who can't really do much when everything is shut down.
Hmm.
So what does it
Yeah.
mean for live theater to be back? To be live theater to be back at the Howard Washington Cultural Center for you as a stage actor?
For live theater being back for me, it's like um it's like having just that big surge of energy pop into like your core and then flow out through the rest of your body because you had this moment. Let's say if the only analogy I could think of is, let's say there's a gambler who's been on a losing streak. He knows he's been good before, but suddenly the pandemic happened. He's on a losing streak. He's down bad. Everything he's betting on, he's failing. And then suddenly something just tells him, put it all on. You win, lose or draw, just put it all on. He puts it all on, and then let's just say he's playing roulette and that ball spins around it, that number of his. And then he's just, that surge, I'm back. I'm back. I'm ready to go. I feel it. I feel restored. I got this energy behind me. That's what coming back to the cultural center was like. That's what coming back to live theater was like. Because we were on what was planned to be a 12 country tour. So I
Mm.
listened, we were getting ready to keep on touring pretty much everywhere that the Jones brothers from the Kings of the Policy, everywhere they set up shop, we were going to be doing a show there. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm ready for that. I'm excited. I'm 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 used to being in plays. I'm used to acting and keeping my craft sharp. And then suddenly it's just an abrupt shutdown. The doors are closed. I remember just, it's in the community, so you're gonna see it. You're driving past the theater. You're just looking
Oh
because we
man.
didn't know it was gonna open back. We didn't know what was going on. So I remember just looking like, oh man, those are the days. Like you're just looking at what it used to be. And so when things started opening up, you mentioned earlier um, how Miss Tillman had figured out ways to um, make it to where we could be in the theater during the shutdown. That was kind of like toward the second half.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like during the shutdown, it was shut down, just dark clouds. It's done. You got to figure out something else to do. And then that's when I ended up, trying to create my own work. That's where as a creator, you're going to find a way. When you're pushed in that space, you're going to try to find something. And when you didn't have a way to express yourself, now you got to make a way. But next thing I know, we started doing some virtual content. Everyone would come in and we had our mask on. We were social distancing and we did a couple productions virtually just to keep it going. She didn't sell it for tickets or anything. It was just to keep the culture alive, just to keep actors in that mode of producing work. And so when we had that, it ran for the little bit that it ran, but it was nothing like when actual doors opened back up and they said, hey, here's a script coming in. We're back. We're getting ready to do another one. You're getting ready to be in the theater with your cast, actually running through lines, throwing out a joke, see if it works. It works. You keep it, you roll it in. That whole process of being a creative artist, being able to get those bits and pieces in, all of that came as a full on surge. And like you said, it's like a celebration. Now that we're back, it's like this show, especially opening night, but for sure closing night. I didn't even know the 16th was. I'm looking forward to that.
Gonna be big.
So yeah, it's gonna be. I'm looking forward to that. So knowing that opening night, it's like, all right, this is what I've been waiting on. This is the moment. We've been shut down. We've seen the theater. We thought about, oh, if I knew it was going to shut down, I would have left it all on the table. Now's your chance to leave it all on the table. And having it back, it's really like it's a celebration, but it's also like you feel a sense of responsibility to yourself, not to anyone else, but to yourself. I owe it to myself to make sure that I truly, truly bring out my best performance, bring out all of my energy because I had it taken away from me for a period. I experienced where it was gone. And you know that it can be fleeting. You never know what can happen. So you want to leave it all on the table. You want to get it going. And just thinking about that, it's not just with the theater, but I remember I took a trip to Atlanta to go watch a well-known director. He was doing a keynote speech. His name was Rob Hardy, and Rob Hardy had done a lot of famous films, a lot of shows, a lot of TV shows. But he was giving a speech to everyone who wanted to be in the industry, wanted to get their start, or they're trying to go further. And I'll never forget what he said. He said to just start where you're at, work with what you got, start now. Don't try to wait for the big opportunity. Whatever you got. If you got a camera phone and your friend has a camera phone, you guys get together. You just start now. And so with the theater, it's got that same essence. Wherever you're at, you got to start. And that could just be being an audience. That could just be just showing up to see a show. You see a show. I've seen actually, just a sidebar. I actually remember very specifically, we had a show uh, Gemelita Tillman's brother, Bimiji Tillman, he performed a show, Love and Heroes. I be a part of it. And I remember they had a scene where there were a bunch of kids, and all these kids got to play roles of being like little villains. If you've ever seen Meteor Man, it reminded me of the Baby Lords. So
Yes.
all of the kids Baby Lords. I kid you not. As part of Jim Alita's formula, we always do like a red carpet experience afterwards. Like after the show, the cast is ready for a meet and greet, lets you get that good feel and celebration. But in that moment, I remember this mother walking up with her two kids, and she said, "My kids love that part with the kids. We want to know how can they get in." It sometimes starts just by coming to see a show. You don't even know what you like until you've started something. Even your favorite song today was once a song you'd never heard before. So you don't even know what your kids might want to be a part of until you bring them to experience the community theater, until you bring them to experience the production created from this culture. It's all a part of just one big synergistic realm. It's like just one organism. Everyone's beating each other. By us producing this work, we give to the community. The community pours right back into the theater, and it's full circle. It's symbiotic.
You know, and this kind of a point that now that we're kind of coming down the home stretch of our conversation. This thing that you mentioned that I think is very important to emphasize. So much of what we lost during the pandemic were things we took for granted,
Took for
and
granted.
totally
Yep.
took for granted. And again, I first learned about the Howard Washington Cultural Center maybe 10 years ago. Again, I have family in Chicago too, and my cousin used to take me on like the tour of Bronzeville and point out the cultural center and tell me a little bit about it. But it
Yeah.
wasn't until after the pandemic I was like, what happened was I was meeting a lot of Black Chicagoans, many of whom knew the cultural center, some of them who didn't. But then I would say, well, did you ever go there? No, I never went. I never been. I never. Like, how could you have that? That would be like me saying I never been to the Apollo Theater. Like, how could that?
Right.
Like, no
Right.
Black New Yorker talks about I ain't never been to the Apollo Theater. And I'm telling you, with all due respect to the Apollo Theater, because it's a much older venue and it's
Yeah.
Howard Cultural Center is 10 times. Like I said, it
Level.
has more capacity than many Broadway
State of
theaters.
the art. State of the art.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
state of the art. So what I'm looking at is, and it's called one of the gems of Chicago, and I'm sending you this message very directly to my Chicago listeners. If you have never been, if all you've done is driven past it occasionally, or you heard about it, whatever you might heard, I would say this is a great opportunity for you to
Hmm.
not take it for granted, to really,
Yes.
to value something that could easily have been lost over these last 2 years,
Hmm.
and say, hey, let me support this venue. And Queens of the Policy, I'm telling you, based on the little bit that I've seen, as a patron who's gotten a glimpse of some of the rehearsals, you, you won't regret it. It's not like you're
Oh
going
no, you definitely
you're
won't
gonna have
regret
a
it.
good time. But I'm
Right.
suggesting that it's about more than just having a good time. This
Hmm.
is an institution that should be invested in, just the way Black Detroiters, support the Fox Theater in Detroit, the Apollo Theater in New York. You do really have a gem, and in this case, it's a gem that is really comparable in capacity to any theater, Black or otherwise. So, I'm telling you, if you are in Chicago, Black or otherwise, I'm not just talking to Black Chicagoans, by the way, Chicagoans in
Yeah.
general,
Or otherwise.
or otherwise,
Yeah.
you should check out
Yeah.
Queens of the Policy and let that be your introduction to what I'm calling the rebirth. Many of us have gone through a rebirth experience because of the pandemic and the
Hmm.
shutdown, individually and institutionally. This is a chance to be involved with the rebirth, the reemergence of Howard Washington Cultural Center, with the return of live theater, with a great
Yeah.
fun production, family friendly. Bring the kids. It's all good, and ages 8 to 80. It's all good. Um,
Really.
yeah,
Really.
it
Yes.
really, really
Yeah.
is. Yep. So, Arthur, what's the best way for our audience to stay on top of what you're doing? I don't know, your social media. What's the best way for people who want to continue to follow you in your career? What should our audience do?
So I'm glad you asked because after reemerging in the into live theater,
Right.
it brought my awareness back to all my social media platforms. All of them kind of went dry around that same time. And so, by me wanting to bring more attention to this production, not just for myself, but because I want you to get this experience, I'm telling you, it's good, it made me get more active on my social media presence. So I got to build it all back up, but the groundwork is already still there. So you can always find all the social media platforms under the exact same handle, Arthur Barnes Jr. straight across. That's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of them everywhere you look. It's Arthur Barnes Jr.
Excellent, excellent. Listen, Arthur, thank you so much for taking time. I know y'all got another rehearsal. I called you at the last minute, literally yesterday, to ask you to do the show. So I just appreciate you for being a guest on Beyond the Hype and for everything you do.
No, I'm honestly 100% honored because one thing I didn't tell you, I remember being 3 years old, walking around in my grandma's house and just playing around with my toys. And what do I see to the right of me on the counter? A Black Enterprise magazine. So for me to be here right now in this moment is monumental for me. Thank you too.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's keep it going, man. You just heard another great edition of Beyond the Hype. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP, Executive Editor at Large at Black Enterprise, and patron of the Howard Washington Cultural Center. Go see Queens of the Policy, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Hype.